Hello and welcome to Time of Death. I'm Ris.
And I'm Dee.
And if you're new here, welcome. We're two nurses that like to talk true crime. We like to focus on cases that have a heavy medical influence to them or cases that feature a medical professional as a perpetrator or victim. I'm just going to give a quick trigger warning. The case we're talking about today does deal with sexual assault. So if you're not in the headspace to listen to that today, then I would just skip this episode. And just a disclaimer that we are not giving any medical advice. We are just speaking on our experiences as nurses. Today, we're going to be talking about a case that one of our followers, Deanna, recommended to us. Thank you, Deanna. It was an interesting case that sheds a lot of light into sexual assault cases are sometimes dismissed.
A lot of times victims are demonized. They are treated as criminals themselves. And, they'll even go as far to say, well, you were kind of asking for it by wearing this or doing this. So I think that's an important facet of the case, too.
John Schneeberger was born in 1961 in northern Rhodesia, which is now Zambia in South Central Africa. And John went to school at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, where he received his MD. In 1987, he ends up moving to Kipling, which is a town in Saskatchewan, Canada. And he begins working there at Kipling Medical Center. And John met a woman named Lisa Dillman, and the two started dating. Lisa had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and in 1991, John and Lisa married. They also went on to have 2 daughters as well. And Lisa considered John to be her soulmate and her best friend. She said all of the kids adored him, including her 2 from the previous marriage. And she said that people even would stop her in the street to remark at how wonderful John was and how lucky Lisa was to have him. On October 31st, 1992, John had a 23-year-old patient by the name of Candace, or Candy is another name she went by, who he actually ended up sedating, and then he sexually assaulted. And he used Versed to sedate Candy. And Versed is the brand name for midazolam, which is a benzodiazepine, like Xanax or Ativan, and it is considered a central nervous system depressant. It's commonly used to help people relax prior to certain medical procedures or surgeries. It can be given intravenously or intramuscularly. People who are given Versed can exhibit confusion, drowsiness. Side effects include amnesia or forgetfulness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, and in some cases it can slow people's breathing, and it can also cause some respiratory depression. So just because someone's given Versed doesn't mean that their memory is going to be wiped blank. It just sedates you. It can make you drowsy, and it could, cause some forgetfulness. You might have periods where you don't really remember in great detail, but it depends on the person. It just depends on the dosage, the situation for sure. Just because you get Versed doesn't mean that you're not going to remember the events that follow. Regardless of John's attempt to keep her quiet, Candy remembered the assault and reported it to police. And police ended up taking a blood sample from John to try to match his DNA to the semen that was found during Candy's forensic exam. And shockingly, it was not a match, and he was cleared. And Candy advocated for herself. She actually requested a redraw to confirm the findings because she was certain it was him. She knew what happened. And they got the blood again, and once more, it was not a match, and he was cleared. Candy was unmarried at the time. She was also a mom, and I think from what I understood, she was kind of stereotyped and dismissed and not really believed at all, especially because of the results of the blood test.
This is a fascinating I just want to jump in. This case, I'm obviously not as informed as Ris is on this case, but when Deanna sent this, I was literally like, capital WTF.
Capital.
So if you're just hearing about this for the first time, like our mom is, you are going to be bamboozled by what this dude does.
Yeah. Because something like that, like even Lisa, John's wife, actually thought this is ridiculous at the time. Like she didn't understand why Candy was trying to, get her husband for doing this. She didn't understand at the time because when you think, oh, it was not a match, like this DNA was not the same as what was found, then you just think,
It's not
okay,
him.
the evidence shows this was not a match. So this is proof it was that he didn't assault you.
Mm-hmm.
So you must be lying, Candy, is kind of what everyone was thinking.
Yeah.
After this second blood test, her case was closed.
He's exonerated.
Yeah, he was completely cleared and it closed in 1994. While all this was going on, John obtained citizenship in Canada in 1993. And he had told a judge at the time that he was not the subject of a police investigation, which was a lie. And so he had done it illegally in that case. But he still had his citizenship in South Africa. Anyway, back to Candy. So Candy was still not deterred. She knew what happened and she continued to advocate for herself. And she ended up hiring a private investigator named Larry O'Brien. Larry looks into John and he actually ends up breaking into John's car. And John had a tube of used chapstick in the car, and he obtained a DNA sample from that tube of chapstick. And the saliva present on the chapstick was run, and it was a match to the semen that was found during Candy's exam. So as a result of this, they redrew John's blood a third time.
Wait, how the heck did they pull that off? Because that was obtained without a warrant.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what? Canada is a different
different
area, different country.
That's true. I was thinking, how is this like evidence that can be used?
Right.
It was obtained illegally.
Yeah.
Actually. And it wasn't even obtained by the police.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was obtained illegally. It wasn't obtained by the police. However, it was still like something that showed that it's not as clear cut as everyone was making it out to be at the time. Because of all this, they redrew John's blood once again. And this time the sample was too short. And I'm like, why didn't they just stick you one more time and get a different sample? So it was not enough sample to run for a DNA test. And the sample had to be thrown out. It wasn't any good. So nothing came from that third test. However, so time just keeps continuing on. And on April 25th, 1997, Lisa's world changed. This is John's wife. She finds out that her 15-year-old daughter from her previous marriage, so John's stepdaughter, was also a victim of John's. And so that day, her daughter took Lisa to her bedroom and she showed her a condom wrapper in the bed. And she said, "Mom, he's done this to me before." And after this, Lisa immediately kicked him out. And shortly after that, she found a box that John had hidden that contained a slew of drugs, vials, syringes, and condoms. And so Lisa immediately goes to police and reports him. And after this, and in an attempt to be more cautious, several samples were obtained from John. They did a blood test, an oral swab, and also like a hair follicle test sample. Did you have to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's really makes like a whole different type of nefarious to this case is that he did learn from his mistakes, and that it doesn't sound like with Candy he used a condom, but with his stepdaughter he's using a condom,
Yeah.
So he's slowly learning, and that is very nefarious and unsettling. But at this time, DNA was not as well understood as it is now. So am I surprised? No, that this medical person would not have as much, not be as cognizant of the DNA that he's leaving behind. No, but, he must have known it was coming down the pike working in the medical field.
All three samples that they obtained matched the semen samples obtained from Lisa's daughter's forensic exam. So finally they have him. And yes, I agree with you. I think that using the condoms is just he's putting more thought into his assaults. John was arrested, and in 1999, his trial begins. And during it, he spoke about how he evaded a positive match during the two blood samples. And this is wild. He actually implanted a penrose drain into his arm. A penrose drain, it's also known as like an open drain. It's a small rubber tube that's used to help drain fluids like blood or lymph fluid at a surgical site after certain procedures or surgeries to help prevent infection and help facilitate healing. So the tube is placed into an opening or cut or incision, and most of the tube stays under the skin, but a small part of it is poking out, and it's sutured into place to allow for like passive drainage of bloods or fluids. So all it is really a tube. And then there is also usually like a gauze dressing over the open part to cover the drain and absorb any fluids that come out. And it's commonly used during intra-abdominal surgeries, for example, a hernia repair or to drain abscesses. So John's drain in particular was a 15 centimeter tube, and it was filled with another man's blood. And it also had anticoagulants in it to help keep the blood from clotting because it was just sitting there. And during the blood draws, he wore a long-sleeved sweater to control how much skin was exposed. So he would just roll up his sweater sleeve to hide the opening of the tube.
Wow.
And, I mean, it's a rubber tube. Like, it probably felt like a nice bouncy vein. And he would just lead the phlebotomist to the location where the drain was, so the collected blood would be sourced by the drain's contents. But, I mean, he probably told them, like, this is where you go to get my blood.
I'm a doctor.
Go
you
here.
need to go right here. I'm telling you, this is the only way I'll give blood.
Mm-hmm.
I could just imagine. But you know what? It's really interesting, too, is that this is a huge gamble, yes, but also this is in the middle of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are worried about, I mean, I know he was well versed about bloodborne infection, if not HIV, hepatitis, C, B, you know, a lot of bloodborne illnesses. But this is someone that was desperate.
Yeah.
But he was very methodical.
But I think it may have been one of his patients, is what I read somewhere. Like, it was his patient's blood.
You
so
need
maybe,
access to it.
And he also probably knew, he could have potentially, I don't know if he did this, but he may have known if they had any, like, bloodborne illnesses. You know what I mean? But it's still a gamble. It's still you're putting it inside your body.
Yeah.
But
That is so, like, I was blown away.
yeah, I know when I read that, I was like, oh my God. That's crazy. But I don't want to say anything good about him, but that is like a pretty smart thing to do.
But he wasn't someone that used condoms. So it's just such a necessity is the mother of invention.
That's so true. So anyway, Lisa finds herself having to be a single parent now of their 4 kids. The youngest was only 13 months old at the time. And Lisa starts working at a diabetes foundation. She takes back her maiden name, and she also sold the car and house to make ends meet. And she filed for divorce and also reported John to the Canadian immigration authorities. John and Lisa had a visitation agreement in regards to the kids, so he was able to see them 3 times a week. And Lisa actually violated the agreement the night before he was convicted. She didn't let her daughters spend the night at his residence, which I don't blame her. But John actually, in retaliation, he filed for contempt of court. And Lisa had to pay a $2,000 fine. John was found guilty of sexual assault of both Candy and his stepdaughter, as well as the administration of a noxious substance, and also he was convicted of obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison.
That's all.
Yeah.
You know what's so crazy? That there's a couple things I have to process. 1, 6 years is disgusting. 2, why would the court allow him visitation if he had a history of sexually assaulting children?
Don't worry, because I get into this. And this is crazy, and you'll see. Anyway, so he was sentenced to 6 years, and one of his victims, and I don't know if it was his daughter. I think it was Candy. I read that she had remarked, "This is a glorious day that I've waited for 7 years. I hope he rots because that's exactly what he deserves for all the hurt that he caused."
Mm-hmm.
John was stripped of his medical license. While he was incarcerated, he continued fighting to have his daughters visit him. And although Lisa fought hard to object, she was ordered to take them to see John in prison once a month. Lisa argued over and over to advocate for her kids. She said they don't know him, and she also said that both daughters needed counseling prior to the visits, but this was just dismissed. The girls would get upset during the visits, and a social worker had to call it off because of their distress at one point. A protest was actually organized by a group called the Mad Mothers Against Pedophiles. And in 2001, the protest occurred, and 100 protesters went to the prison to support Lisa in trying to stop the court-mandated visitations. Finally, John, in 2001, abandoned his insistence to see the girls. He gave up on trying to see them. And when Lisa told her kids they no longer had to visit John, the younger daughter jumped up and shouted, "Yippee." So they clearly did not want to see John. They have their older sister who was raped by John. And yeah, it must have been so traumatizing. Even, I think they were 5 and 6 at this time. And it just must have been so horrifying for the whole family to have to continue seeing this man. John served only 4 years in prison before being released on parole. And he was stripped of his Canadian citizenship, and he actually was deported because of his lying back to the judge in 1993. So he was deported to South Africa, and he moves to Durban in South Africa, which is where his mom lived. So he's there in 2004. And less than 3 weeks after his return, he applied to the Health Professions Council of South Africa to start working in medicine again. And I guess his application was in process, but a few months after he put in his application, he actually withdrew it. And that's really about it. Lisa just struck me as like a big advocate for her family throughout the whole thing. Candy was a huge advocate for herself and for any future victims that he may have had by just continuing to fight, regardless of people probably telling her that she was crazy and that she was, gaslighting him. And yeah, that's it. And John is he's out, so he's in South Africa.
Would he have been able to get his doctor designation back in another country?
I don't know. He was stripped in Canada.
Yeah.
It's really unsettling. I'm totally with the Mothers Against Pedophilia. I think there is no world that he should have been allowed to be around children ever again. And it's a travesty that he got such a little amount of time.
Yeah, that's just wild to me. That was wild to me. 4 years for these horrible assaults. It's horrific, and huge betrayal of trust. Betrayal too is as a father, and betrayal as a medical professional.
Yeah, he used his powers for evil.
Mm-hmm.
He used his. Imagine if he really channeled this brain power that all this energy he spent into eluding, capture and eluding, having to give a sample. He could have cured freaking cancer, man. He could have done something really awesome and great, but instead he's implanting penrose dreams in his arm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like that's so crazy and cunning.
Yep. And so methodical.
Yes.
He probably had this plan. If I ever get convicted, or if I ever get charged with anything or any suspicion towards me, I'm going to use this tactic that I created with a penrose drain. That's crazy.
It is crazy. It's brilliant and it's crazy and evil.
Why?
It's very evil.
All right. On that note, Ris, excellent case. Deanna, thank you again. Very, very interesting. I want to say thank you for that sharing that with us. Rissa, 10 out of 10. You did a great job covering it.
Is there a lesson? I think there's always a lesson.
Lesson is use your powers for good, not
Yeah.
evil, man.
Definitely. And also, there's a lesson to never give up. Never
That's
give
true.
up. If you believe that you're right or it's the right thing to do, don't give up. Just
Yeah.
like Candy.
You know what? Candy, she just struck me as a very strong, tenacious person who just kept, she knew what was right. She knew that John was wrong and evil, and she just kept pursuing it no matter what anyone said, and that really made a huge difference. Okay, thank you all so much for listening today. The time is 2025. That's 8:25 p.m. for those of you who do not use military time, and we're checking out. We'll see you next week.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.